I'm Maddie. I talk about all things related to alienation. I was alienated from my dad for 20 years. I figured everything out a little over a year ago, and now I'm doing this project to raise awareness and speak out against this really insidious and damaging form of child abuse and domestic violence. Over 10 people have sent me this research study that has just come out, and I'm so excited to read it and discuss it with you guys. This research study, I feel the need to give a personal thank you to the University of Tasmania in Australia, because Australia seems to be getting a lot of research done when it comes to parental alienation. So good job, Australia. I really appreciate it. It was just published this year. It's called A Qualitative Exploration of Reunification Post-Alienation from the Perspective of Adult Alienated Children and Targeted Parents. Whew, that's a mouthful. So basically what they're looking at is how do alienated children who grow up and figure it out fare when they try to reconnect and rebuild their relationship with their targeted parent, aka me, right now. So I'm really curious to see if this study reflects my own experience, because it is such a specific form of abuse that it has very specific effects on the child. Now is as good a time as any to give that disclaimer that in this video and all my videos, I can only speak from my personal experience. There are so many alienated children out there, so many have different stories and different experiences, so I can only speak from my own experience, and I'm not a professional. Take it or leave it, that's where I'm coming from. The study is quite long. I'm not going to read all of it. I'm going to go over what I think is important. I did briefly read the study, but I haven't gotten into the results and the discussion part yet, which is always the most interesting to me. It is important to mention, though, that the aim of this study was to explore the experiences of voluntary reunification from the perspectives of adult alienated children and targeted parents. So this does not include children who are made to reunify with their parent. These are people in my position who have found out the truth on their own and voluntarily sought out their targeted parent to rebuild that relationship. So the method is 9 adult and alienated children and 12 targeted parents, and they participated in semi-structured interviews. They start with catalysts for reunification. That's interesting because the first questions that I started getting when I started this project were always, and they still are, what made you learn the truth? What made you reach out to your targeted parent? And people are so curious because they want that for their children. Number 1, they talk about the readiness of the adult alienated child. 5 of these children referred to their own readiness as a key factor in seeking to reunify with their targeted parent. This includes feeling ready to accept both of their parents after parental alienation. Readiness involved adult alienated children permitting themselves to love their targeted parent after alienation. I think the time I went to my father and hugged him was when I gave myself permission to love him. I think that's what reunification is. It's that permission, that feeling of I'm allowed to love you. Other adult alienated children describe being ready to explore a relationship with their targeted parent in search for a sense of wholeness and resolution. Like one kid says, I felt like I wanted to find a place where I belonged. I had this parent out there that I had no idea existed. I felt like I was missing part of myself. I can't relate to that, but I can see how maybe if you hadn't seen the parent in like a decade, that would be more of your situation. But just for anyone who's new to my story, my parents actually lived within 10 to 20 minutes of each other my whole life. So I did see my dad. He was over with my brothers because they have a good relationship. But I was definitely still severely alienated. Personal experiences of divorce. 3 adult alienated children describe how divorce and alienation from their own children prompted them to reflect on their childhood. This is so sad how 50% of alienated children go on to become alienated parents. So sad. This should be the last resort way that you figure it out. Thankfully, I can't relate to that one, but I've met a lot of adult children now who sadly can relate to that, and that's how they figured it out, is they became alienated from their own children and realized that's what this is. I went through that. Illness or death of a family member. 2 adult children described the illness or death of a family member is what led them to seek to reunify with their targeted parent. I guess the one that I can say applies to me would be the readiness of the adult alienated child. So the study goes on to talk about factors influencing reunification, and just like the catalyst, they divide the factors into 3 sub-themes, which are alienating parents, other family members and friends, and physical distance. Alienated parents. It says 7 adult alienated children reported that their alienating parent interfered with reunification. For some, interference involved alienating parents actively working against reunification. I believe that. One alienated child said, just recently I told my alienating parent that I was actually contacting my targeted parent again, and she doesn't want me to hear it. You can feel it. Her entire body is tense whenever my targeted parent's name is mentioned. But she's very happy if I turn around and say he's a pain in the ass. Then she agrees with me, then she relaxes, then she talks about him being a pain in the ass. I guess it just shows how different people handle different things. I guess some alienated children will figure the truth out and then they'll go to their pathological parent to talk about it. Maybe to ask questions or see if they're right. I don't know, but in my case, I figured everything out. I was so traumatized and disturbed that I would not go to her in person to talk about this. We did have a phone call, but that's that. It was this feeling of, who the hell are you? I never have known you. I've never known you. It was that big of a betrayal for me. I never once questioned the things I was being made to believe. I was way too traumatized to go talk to her about this. I knew she would lie, first of all, and never take accountability for it. And then once I did have that phone call, which I made sure that someone else was there with me, it became creepier. But I'm going off on a tangent, so I'll bring it back to the study. Now, if you're an adult child and you figure everything out and you go to your targeted parent to try to get clarity or answers or an apology, maybe. First of all, they're going to be afraid. They're going to be so scared that they're found out, that you know the truth. They're going to be cast in a negative light. They're going to be scared. And then also, if you go to them, they're going to try to sabotage the heck out of you reunifying with your parent. I mean, I think any adult child will have the wherewithal to know that. So this doesn't surprise me. Some reported that their alienating parent rejected them when they resumed contact with the targeted parent. So not all these kids go no contact with their pathological parent. Some people want to get together with their targeted parent, and then when they do that, their alienating parent, their pathological parent, rejects them. Well, if they didn't turn on you before, now they are. One adult alienated child described how the influence of the alienating parent on reunification could continue beyond the alienating parent's own death. Oh my goodness. They said, I would say my alienating parents passing away had a negative impact on my relationship with my target parent. I think my target parent saw it as a means to open the door because the influence was no longer there. Not realizing that the influence is still there. It's always there in your brain. I held on to my alienating parent probably more tenaciously after her death than I did before. I think I would have been more open before her passing because it would have allowed me more time to see her flaws, to deal with her flaws, to come to terms with the situation. That's really rough. That's part of the sadness and the devastation of all of this, is that, life is finite, and so people can die before you have the chance to heal. You can learn the truth, and unfortunately have your targeted parent already be passed away. You can never get the opportunity to express your sorrow and your contrition, and which is so sad. Then it talks about other family members and friends. 4 adult alienated children stated that other people aside from their alienating parent interfered with reunification. Oh, you don't say. I'm familiar with this. These people included siblings, step-parents, extended family, and friends. Yes, it's really hard. This is such a nasty, nasty dynamic, says one child. This whole thing, because so many people get involved that make it really, really difficult for you to have a relationship with someone that you really care about. Yeah. It should also be noted that family members who were not influenced by the alienating parents' use of parental alienating behaviors reportedly played a positive role in facilitating reunification. The third factor is physical distance. 2 adult and alienated children reported that physical distance from their targeted parent interfered with reunification. I can see that. Now it talks about adult alienated child relationships, the nature of the personal relationships throughout the reunification process. Again, they found 3 sub-themes. They have a number they like, it's 3. The connection between the adult alienated child and targeted parent, that reunification requires time and effort, and the difficulty for the adult alienated child to trust. This all sounds spot on to me. Connection between the adult alienated child and the targeted parent. 8 adult alienated children described how the targeted parent was unfamiliar to them throughout reunification. They described a lack of parent-child bond. Yikes. One adult child said, I don't love my targeted parent. It's just, there's nothing there. There's no bond there at all. And that's brought about by the fact that I had no contact with him my entire life until I was already an adult. I don't feel that severe. I don't personally. But if I hadn't seen my dad that whole time, I imagine I would. Others described a distant, uncomfortable, or strained relationship. My targeted parent, they say, is so much like me, and I just love that. And the tenderness we have is there, but the physical attachment, you just don't have the naturalness of it. Oh my God, this is making me sad. That's how I feel. I don't like to admit that that's how I feel. 5 adult alienated children reported that they did feel an attachment to their targeted parent. This attachment took the form of a parent-child bond or mutual love and understanding. I don't actually have to start from scratch establishing a relationship with my targeted parent, someone said. It's not really from scratch because, as you know, as buried as it is, we do have a bond because she's my mother. I can relate to that too. Attachment was also described as noticed similarities in appearance or personality between the adult alienated children and targeted parent. I wasn't like my alienating parent and sister, and then when I met my target parent, I was like, wow, all right, I'm like my target parent. I can see that. Now I notice some similarities between us and I do like it, but in the past, if you had pointed out a similarity between us, I would have taken that as an insult. So now it's a matter of mind games and a matter of switching my perception to view similarities as a positive thing or even just a neutral thing rather than a negative thing. So the second sub-theme is reunification requires time and effort. 5 adult alienated children explained that reunifying with their targeted parents required considerable effort from both parties over a protracted period of time. For some, the reunification process spanned decades and involved periods of contact and withdrawal. I don't like the sound of that. That would give me anxiety. Adult alienated children referred to effort as needing to be reciprocal and sustained to maintain the relationship. One child said, I think that human beings, as complicated and complex as they are, nothing is clear-cut, and this concept you could describe as reunification, it's kind of like it doesn't happen easily. It's something that has to have considered thought and energy put into it, like all relationships. The third sub-theme is difficulty for the adult alienated child to trust. That's a given. That's a given. 4 adult alienated children reported that they had difficulty trusting others throughout the reunification process. They attributed this to the negative effects of parental alienation and parental alienating behaviors. 4 adult alienated children also described that mistrust was internalized and reported difficulty trusting themselves, their own thoughts, judgments, and feelings. That's my biggest struggle right there. And I've spoken now in these interviews you can see on my channel to others who have that same problem, and that's a big problem if you can't trust your own perceptions of the world. For me, I don't trust myself to know who to trust because I've been so betrayed by my own parent. They describe this as you're constantly having to evaluate, should I or shouldn't I? Can I or can't I? What does this mean? What is the ulterior motive here? Is this genuine? Is this not genuine? Decades later, I have that problem. My targeted parent was always very, very genuine, but I had the conflict of, do I or don't I? Oh my God, that's exactly it. That is exactly it. I mean, my dad does everything when we're together to show me that he loves me by taking the time to do things with me and spend time with me and with my kids. Surprise me with little gifts and just to tell me that he loves me. He really does everything he can and everything I would want him, need him to do. And yet still there's that voice in my head that says, is this real? It's always looking for the proof that it's not. And the fact that my parent caused my brain to do that due to what the brainwashing and the systematic programming of me to not trust him. That is so wrong for a parent to do that. We're going to now talk about the role of communication in reunification. They like their rhymes in Australia. Communication and reunification. Communication in the reunification process has been a hurdle. It's been a hard one because there is this whole life I've had that my targeted parent hasn't been clued into. They don't even still, after a year, have even 85% of a grasp on it. They probably have a 15% grasp on what I've been through with my alienating parent. So it makes it really difficult. For example, when my targeted parent mentions that they hope I can reunite with my pathological parent, it's really difficult for me to maintain a neutral state of being. I get angry. I get really frustrated because I have to do what's best for me, for my marriage, my family. That's the bottom line. And this is what's best for me, my marriage, and my family. So, and I guess what it comes down to is a feeling of lack of understanding. I feel a lot of the times like there's a lack of understanding between us. I really do appreciate that my targeted parent just wants to focus on the present and the future and the now. Here's the problem, because I have these two thoughts in my head at the same time. I know this is super traumatic time in their past too, and they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to think about it. They've had 20 years to grieve and 20 years to process all of this. It's much more new for me, so I know that. So let's see what the study has to say. They found 3 sub-themes. Again, it's like they're sticking to the number 3. 1, lack of communication skills to facilitate reunification. 2, the types of communication that facilitated reunification. And 3, the types of communication that hindered reunification. From all the interviews with adult alienated children, 3 key communication strategies used by targeted parents appear to be the most helpful in facilitating successful reunification: objective, persistent, and compassionate. These strategies appear to be important to building trust. I think that my targeted parent being open, honest, and not shying away from questions, he wasn't defensive. I think that was probably a huge part in what helped me be more trusting of him. Persistent but not unnecessarily frequent attempts at communication by targeted parents reportedly helped to facilitate reunification. Forms of attempted communication included phone calls, messages, letters, and attendance at events. Yes, I personally want more communication with my parent. I like the communication. I need the communication. Otherwise, my brain will start to convince myself that he doesn't care about me, actually, because that's what I've been made to believe for 20 years. I'd say you make more mistake as a targeted parent in reunification. You would make a bigger mistake by not communicating enough. That's just my opinion. Some adult alienated children advised that they were not aware of their parents' attempts at communication. Okay, well, that sucks. That's kind of why you need to set boundaries with your alienating parent. And then it talks about the types of communication that hinder reunification. And they made note of 3 communication styles used by themselves, their targeted parents, and their alienating parents that hindered communication. That's interesting. Avoidant or reactive, past-focused, and confrontational. 5 adult alienated children also referenced past-focused communication by their targeted parents as a hindrance to reunification. That one person said, he would say, "Oh, you remember that house I used to live in, and you would come and swing on the swing and this tree," and he can remember it all vividly, and basically I called him a liar because I couldn't remember anything. That's happened to me a lot. 2 adult alienated children reported being confrontational in their approach to communicating with their targeted parents, which created more distance. Someone said, "I had no empathy when I met my targeted parent. I was just basically saying, well, why didn't you call me? How come you never sent me any birthday gifts?" I could see on either side, not having empathy for each other is going to destroy the communication. You have to have empathy. Okay, so we're moving on to now talking about adult alienated children's understanding of alienation post-reunification. Adult alienated children shared their understanding of parental alienation after having reunified with their targeted parents. Reflections were divided into 5 subthemes: withholding blame for alienation, lack of ideal parental relationships, sympathy for parents, guilt and shame, and the role of therapy. So they say 7 adult alienated children stated that they did not blame either parent for their alienation after reunification. Instead, they accepted both parents for who they are and could see both perspectives. They no longer felt obliged to choose between them. I don't blame my dad for the alienation, but I do blame my mom. I also have empathy for her at the same time, but I don't know. Can't relate to that. Lack of ideal parental alienations. 5 adult alienated children acknowledged that the nature of their relationships with their parents were not their version of ideal. No, they're not ideal. Reflections on alienating parent behaviors. The only thing it talks about here is really guilt and shame. I think that's across the board. So I might have to do part 2 on the targeted parents experience. That's the experience of the adult children. I am interested in the targeted parent, but this has already become a long video. So it says the impacts of reunification. At the end of the study, it says that adult alienated children reported developing a sense of acceptance and understanding of their circumstances and the people involved. They learned to withhold blame for the alienation and have sympathy for both parents. They learned to have healthier critical thinking skills, recognize that their relationships with their parents are complex. Adult alienated children brought guilt and shame into the reunification process. And that needs to be explored further in the future research. Adult alienated children's experience of guilt and shame should not be overlooked if they seek therapeutic support before, during, or after reunification. Some targeted parents describe their lives as being enriched and regaining meaning through reestablishing a relationship with their child. The finding is consistent with post-traumatic growth theory, which proposes that some people can make meaningful and positive changes as a result of traumatic experiences. Yeah, I gotta look more into that and do a video on that. That sounds good. I want that. I want to be that. I want to do that. That's what I want. PTSD growth. Other participants described having difficulty parenting their adult alienated children post-reunification due to their mental and physical health and financial situation. They need to learn how to parent a traumatized adult who is very different to the child they last saw before being alienated from them. Yeah. Limitations and directions for future research. Yes, the current study sample is very small. I hope they can do this again and increase the amount of subjects in their study. Also, they talk about self-report bias. Memories to past events can be influenced by the passage of time. It does mention at the end of the study, if parental alienating behaviors are considered abusive behaviors, it is unlikely that these behaviors will abate simply because the child has become an adult. Yet, we should encourage these children to maintain a relationship with the pathological parent. It goes on to say, perpetrators of family violence do not easily surrender their power and control. Well, there you have it. Thank you to the University of Tasmania in Australia for dedicating time and funds and effort towards figuring out how we can best treat people in my situation and my dad's situation so we can become victors of our circumstance and access that PTSD growth. I hope you found something interesting or helpful or insightful about this video. I'll leave the link for this study in the description of this video. I would really encourage you to read it. If you enjoyed this video or enjoy what I've been doing with my channel, please subscribe, like the video, and feel free to share my project with people that you know or in your support groups. I really appreciate your support. Thank you, everybody. Hope you guys are doing well, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.